Hello, everyone. On behalf of James and myself and our whole family, can you hear me all right? Okay. We want to welcome you and thank you so much for coming today. Whether you have come 2 miles or 2,600 miles, we're very delighted you are here. And we do have one young lady who came from San Francisco, California, Ashley Kalaya. So she takes the prize for coming the farthest. And I've counted 16 different states being represented today. So it's just amazing. I knew that it was going to be overwhelming to see all of you here today, and it really is. It really is. I'm looking out over the sea of faces of former students, colleagues, and dear friends, ranging from a best buddy of James's from high school, who also happens to be my cousin, so I knew him first. Dave Olson and his lovely wife Nigel traveled from Illinois, and his Cornell College roommate, Mark Connor, affectionately known as Dad, who we haven't seen in 30 years, and he's here today from New Hampshire. And then there are students from the very first year James taught until the very last year James taught. Colleagues from the university, you've all come here today because of the common denominator of James Cutsinger. He scolded me a bit for putting so many family pictures in the slideshow saying, this is a retirement party for my academic career. But I told him there was not a single person going to be in this room today who wasn't interested in the whole of his life. This isn't just a retirement celebration. It's a life celebration. I wasn't going to do that. There is no clear line of delineation anyway. Between his professional teaching life and his family life. His students have always become friends of the family. And he's always been a teacher to his family and his friends. It just is who he is, a natural-born teacher. During this past year, nothing has warmed my heart more than seeing him give a mini lecture to me or one of the kids or a friend at church who asks him a question, and he'll just launch into a little mini lecture because that's what he does. And we all ask him questions all of the time because he knows the answers, or he will find the answer. Our daughter-in-law, Emily, told me just the other day that little 4-year-old Julian came up to her and asked her a question. And before she had a chance to answer, he looked at her and said, "Mommy, is that a question for Ferdy?" Because that's what they call their grandfather. His life of study and searching and prayer has equipped him to help all of us find the answers. It was a very difficult task choosing the speakers for today's program. We tried to have a representation of colleagues and students from over the decades. But we didn't want to be here until midnight, so we did have to limit the number. But we're going to leave the mic open during dinner, so if any of you would like to come up and say something once everyone is seated and having dinner, we're just going to have open mic. And you're welcome to come up and share a remembrance if you'd like to. And now I'm going to turn this program over to our 3 wonderful children. Leah, who is now Leah Emery, Kellen, who is Kellen McCullen, and Trevor, and they are going to in turn introduce this afternoon's speakers. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi guys. I'm not sentimental. I don't think. In a conversation once, one of his students asked me what it was like to have Professor Cutsinger as a dad. At the time, I had no sensible answer. Perhaps I still don't, since I've never had another. Now, having seen many other paternal possibilities, I try not to take this for granted. Many of you have been taught by my father in the classroom. I have been instructed by him all my life. Oh yes, I'm familiar with the dreaded red pen. But he also gave me a love for poetry, sarcasm, and Byzantine chant. That last one's a joke. I'm just grateful that I can occasionally return the favor and teach Dad some practical things, like how to open a gas tank, and how a $10 bill inserted into a change machine yields 40 quarters. Thank you for all you've taught me over the years, and for all the Mozart laughs. May there be many more. And though there's no alcohol, I'd like to make a toast. Higgledy-piggledy, Dr. James C. has now become a retiree. The reason is sad, so come pray with me for health in this life and eternally. And now we'll hear from some of his actual students and colleagues. I'm going to introduce first Steve Lynn. Dr. Stephen Lynn is the Dean of USC's South Carolina Honors College, having previously served as a Senior Associate Dean in the College of Arts and Sciences and as Chair of the Department of English. Dad says Dr. Lynn has been for many years a good friend and strong supporter of his teaching, as well as of Dad's rigorous grading of students' grammar.
I knew of James Cutsinger many years before I ever met him. I was in the English department at the university. I was teaching advanced undergraduate writing classes, and sometimes I would encounter a student whose first paper in the course would be remarkably good, clear, thoughtful, penetrating, eloquent, consequential. And I would wonder, what am I going to teach this student? And since I like to go over papers with students in person, our sessions would mostly be me just effusively praising their work, which they seem to like, but it feel very useful. With surprising frequency, these excellent writers didn't at all seem surprised by my praise, or really that impressed with my impression of their impressiveness. They would just say, yes, I had Professor Cutsinger's class. They would say, yes, Professor Cutsinger taught me to write, as if I don't know why I'm in your class. And I can go ask them, so why did you take my class? And they would say, well, it was required. So I looked up Cutsinger. He's a guy in religious studies. What's he doing teaching writing? More importantly, how is he teaching writing? What is he doing? And it turns out it wasn't really miraculous. He wasn't invoking some higher power. I don't think that was at least the only thing he was doing. Any more than people writing better is a kind of little miracle. But from what I could tell, he just simply insisted that the students write well. He took great care in explaining to them how they weren't writing well, or happy days when they weren't. He took their work very seriously. He cared enough about them to tell them the truth. So when a very good paper was turned in, it might have more text written on it than the student had written. That was a good paper. And I've heard from a reliable source that a bad paper might have only one word on it. And in this particular case I heard about, the one word was blame. Eloquent commentary. Very, very useful, no doubt, to the student who received it. Of course, he wasn't teaching writing in his course per se. He was teaching everything. And this is why he won the Mungo Teaching Award. Honors students cherished his classes, and why he changed so many of their lives in profoundly good ways. Insisting that his students write well was just an integral part of teaching them to think well, to have orderly minds, to be thoughtful and creative and articulate people, open to ideas and insights. When I did finally meet Professor Cutsinger and work with him a bit, it was easy to see why students were so devoted and appreciative. He really isn't like anybody else. And so I want to celebrate James Cutsinger's uniqueness and his singular contribution to the university and the Honors College and his colleagues and his students. You, Professor Cutsinger, are much appreciated.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? I'm Kellen. I'm the younger Cutsinger daughter and half of the Cutsinger twins. While I've been privileged to meet and get to know many of you over the years, the stories that have peppered my childhood of all dads, students, colleagues, and friends are just as alive in my memory if I didn't know you personally. Thank you for being here today. I did not inherit my father's profound intelligence or quick wit, but despite my less than stellar grammar or ability to quickly comprehend big ideas, my father helped to foster what we came to call my emotional intelligence. Despite all the papers he had to edit and cover with red ink, or the number of times he had to explain what a century actually is, Dad never failed to see the strengths in me, even when I could not see them for myself. I find that it is a rare person who can foster the unique and individual gifts of another with such intuition and clarity. My siblings and I, and every person in this room, are a testament to the marked influence one man can have when he takes the time and makes the effort to wake up, to strive to truly see and know the divine within and around him. By this striving, my dad has helped so many, least of all me. My father taught me what work in the deepest sense looks like, and for that I will be forever grateful. It is my pleasure to next introduce our next speaker, Dr. Stephen Boyer. Dr. Stephen Boyer was a student at the University of South Carolina from 1979 to 1983, when her father was originally being hired by the Department of Religious Studies. After graduation as a religious studies major, he did graduate work at Gordon Conwell Theological Seminary, and then completed a PhD in theology at Boston University. Steve spent 2 years teaching at Rose Hill College with Dad, and then moved to his current academic position, teaching theology at Eastern University in St. David's, Pennsylvania, where he has been for the last 20 years. His first date with his wife Heidi was babysitting 3 small Cutsinger children. I can say that since then, I have babysat Steve and Heidi's 2 oldest children. So
sorry for the crutches. I really don't mean to make a bigger splash than Dr. Cutsinger himself. I am going to frame my remarks tonight under the title, Gifts I Received from James Cutsinger. Let me tell you in advance that there are 4 of these gifts. All of them begin with the letter M. So you can summarize the whole operation simply as Gift number 1. First, James and his family together conspired to give me the gift of a Mrs. Since, as Callan just pointed out, my wife Heidi and I enjoyed our first date babysitting the 3 little miniature Cutsingers. In the mid-1980s, I was, if I may say so in all humility, the babysitter of choice in the Cutsinger home. I still include that on my resume sometimes. And there's no better way to win a young damsel's heart than to let her see you maintaining your composure as newborn twins squall while an older sister offers a steady stream of advice. Heidi was smitten, and the rest is history. James and Carol and Kellen and Trevor and Leah. Thank you. I am grateful. Second gift. James gave me the gift of a master, for it was he who suggested to me, as an irresolute, directionless undergraduate, that I might find a worthwhile subject for a short independent study course in the work of an Oxford don by the name of Clive Staples Lewis. I had never heard of the fellow, but I had not gone through half of the problem of pain with Cutsinger before I myself was rather smitten. I read more of Lewis's apologetics, I read more of his imaginative works, I went through all 7 Chronicles of Narnia in a single week over the course of a Christmas break. The world at that time, thankfully, still being free from the blasphemy of Hollywood films that adopt the names of Lewis's stories while actively attacking the vision that those stories represent. No extra charge for that editorializing. In any case, I enjoyed a lot of Lewis's work. I pressed hard at one point to convince my wife that our first child should be named Trumpkin. That did not work out. But in my teaching and in an awful lot of my casual conversation, the signs of Lewis's undiminished significance persist. Thank you for that. I am grateful. Third, James gave me the gift of money. Money? Well, not much, and it wasn't really his money, and it didn't really last very long. But James was instrumental in bringing me to Rose Hill College, just as I was finishing up a PhD and therefore needing gainful employment. It may have been simply a marketing move. If you're going to start an Orthodox great books college in the middle of the Bible Belt, you better find a sympathetic Protestant to serve on the faculty. I think that was written into my job description. In any case, the time at Rose Hill was one of joys and sorrows, but more joys than sorrows, I think. And it did let me work alongside of James and with a few of you, too, in a whole new way. I was grateful for that start in my own teaching career. Last of all, a fourth gift, but what shall I say, number 4, that James was a model. Well, yes, he was a model of dialectical skill and winsomeness. Now, 30 years later, he still defines for me what it means to be a teacher. Shall I say that James was a mentor? Certainly, for more than any other individual in my life, he showed me what mattered. He helped me to see what was worth knowing in a world that was chock full of the deadly details of knowledge falsely so-called. But no, I think I need to reserve my last M for a gift that might surprise even James. I must say that James gave me what I can only call, in a good evangelical idiom, a mission. A mission. For in showing me what was really worth knowing, he showed me also the unutterable difference between a means and an end. He exemplifies to me the real integration of intellectual rigor and spiritual vitality and imaginative depth and practical wisdom and personal embodiment, all sorts of things. Yet this deep, substantial, integrated wholeness was not the goal. It was simply how you lived if you were serious about the goal. Even at points where I have thought and continue to think that James is wrong about certain aspects of the goal.
No.
He has seemed to me to have exactly the right posture before what he is wrong about. He seeks the truth. That's a capital T truth. And he seeks it with his whole heart and life. We have it on good authority that if a man seeks, he will find. Because of James, I also want to find. And so in the presence of God, I say, thank you for sending me on that sort of mission. I am grateful. Dr. Cutsinger, as you retire from your formal career as a teacher, I am very honored to be your student still. May your tribe increase. God bless you.
I'm Trevor, the youngest Cutsinger. To many of you, Dr. James Cutsinger is a remarkable teacher, mentor, friend, or perhaps all three. Leah, sort of. We didn't compare notes. But I'm going to say what I was going to say anyway, because it's a little different. Growing up, my sisters and I would periodically encounter a particularly devoted student, some of you are in the room, who would ask with a sense of awe, what is it like having Dr. Cutsinger as your dad? My answer may have changed over the years in subtlety, but the substance hasn't. To me, he is just my dad. I was way more focused on playing games of horse, and finally beating him. I don't know how old I was. He always had quite a good shot. Than I was in exploring deep philosophical truth. He said to me more than once growing up, perhaps jokingly, that having children was an investment for future intelligent conversation, and it's sort of paying off. I know that all of you in this room, and some who couldn't be here, make up for any below-market returns he has had the misfortune to endure in the Intelligent Conversation Department on my account. One short story I'd like to tell on this occasion is, I think, representative of the remarkable reach that Dr. Cutsinger has achieved in his career. I've enjoyed many memorable experiences thanks to both of my parents, but one particularly defining moment came with my dad in the summer of 2007, when we embarked on a pilgrimage to Mount Athos in Greece. We had returned to the capital Karius as we transitioned to another monastery, and at one point I took a seat along the road while Dad went in search of something at the little general store. That something may or may not have been a Snickers bar. A monk approached me and asked me something in Greek, to which I responded that I don't speak Greek. So he switched to English seamlessly and asked me the time and then my name. I said, Trevor. At this point, Dad walks up and says, hello. The monk asks his name, and Dad says simply, James or Yakovos, I think. He asks his last name. Dad says, Cutsinger. The monk's eyes grew wide. And he said loudly, Cutsinger! You're that crazy mixed-up Sufi. Good story. The conversation carried on strangely for a couple of minutes, and we extracted ourselves as politely as we could and headed on our way. The lessons for me, first, use my last name carefully. Even, or perhaps especially, thousands of miles from home. And two, you can't take Dr. C anyway. I'd like to introduce our third speaker, Shannon Smith. Shannon studied with Dad from 2009 to 2011, earning a master's degree in religious studies, though she wishes to add that she has never really stopped being our father's student. Since graduation, she has taught religious studies at USC Aiken and is the director of the Crumley Archives at the Lutheran Theological Southern Seminary in Columbia. Shannon.
Although this is an occasion to celebrate the retirement of Dr. C as professor and teacher, I have to confess, I find it strange to think of him as truly retired. Quite frankly, though I've been out of his classroom for nearly a decade, he's never ceased to be my teacher, and he always shall be. Still, some words to reflect over my time as his student, lessons he's taught me, many of which I'm still learning, are in order. I remember fondly the countless hours poring over the church fathers, the seemingly endless moments we would dissect a single sentence with the aim of achieving some better form. The mental gymnastics we also called metaphysics, the dialogues which so often resulted in anamnesis, and every so often aporia. The emphasis on right speech and diction, the lectures, the painfully rewarding Oxford tutorials, the exams, the anticipations of grades, the comments, and finally a thesis defense. He taught us first principles and then apophatic theology. He insisted that we must be prepared to suspend our disbelief, to question all things, but to trust in providence. He showed us how to be severe to the self, but compassionate to others, to seek beauty and avoid distortion. He taught us that to have knowledge of the self is to have knowledge of God, and that the consecrated life was the only life worth living. He showed us the way of prayer, how to assimilate beauty, the necessity of virtue, the principial nature of truth. And he always did so in a way that was tempered with good humor, a great deal of humility, and a brilliance that encouraged us to demand more from ourselves. He attracted some of the most notable students I've ever known, and the friendships forged underneath his instruction are the greatest I've been blessed to have. I can't help but to think of one student in particular who couldn't be here this evening because even as we speak, he's participating in the sacrament of marriage. But I thought it only special and appropriate that Christopher McLaughlin be given the opportunity to say a few words too, and this is what he sent me the other evening. Echoing some of my own musings, he adds that James mercilessly upturned layers of my soul as the plow the soil, and both showered gentle compassions and sent beneficent rays upon it. I thank God that, unlike many other college students, I was led to begin the unlearning of my specious ways of thinking while still in the process of seeking my bachelor's degree. That was when I first met James, second semester of my freshman year. In courses, seminars, and conversations, I was shown by James the merits of education in the Platonic sense. Dr. C's Socratic midwifery gave me an authentic introduction to the etymology of education. He taught me how a facilitator of dialogue both leads one out of his own prim outfit of modern assumptions and also leads out from the heart into conscious mind's awareness, the wisdom which is ever available but hard to be discovered. If James won me over, he continues, nearly immediately by his noble bearing and his sharp, bright mind, it was his warmth which really drew me into him. In the very first semester I studied under him, when I made known to him my interest in the Eastern rite of divine liturgy, I being a Catholic then, the man promptly invited me to attend church with him and his wife. This was the first of my extracurricular engagements with James and his family, and I must say, those which followed are among my most cherished memories. The peace and welcome I have felt in the Cutsinger's home provides me with a treasury of memories to which I can and do turn when I find myself in need of a reminder of the atmosphere of prayer and love. All in all, there is possibly no one of my acquaintance to whom I owe more in the realm of my intellectual development, and scarcely any who has made such a deep and abiding impression on my whole soul as James Cutsinger. I hope never to be rid of your voice in my head, your keen-eyed superciliousness in my imagination, and your love and wisdom in my heart. Thank you, and I thank God for you. I knew he'd be able to say things better than I. That's why I enlisted him. But as I remarked from the beginning, I find it misleading to speak of Dr. C as a teacher retired. He continues to teach all of us by his faith in God, fidelity to truth, and love of wisdom. Finally, I would be remiss not to mention the other great role he has played in my life and my family's life, and that is one of friend. A good teacher is also a good friend. The roles are inseparable, or like two sides of one coin, as Dr. C might put it. That coin is one of great price, and I'm eternally grateful that it has been given to me. Its worth is beyond measure. May God bless and keep you, Dr. C, and may he continue to fill our hearts with the sweetness of gratitude for giving you to us as our teacher and friend.
Please stop making me cry.
Me too.
I'm now going to introduce Jordan Bissell. Jordan Bissell is a native of Bloomington, Indiana. In 2007, he chose to come to USC as a religious studies graduate student, specifically in order to study Christian Platonism and perennialist thought with our father. After graduating in 2009, Jordan spent a year and a half as a novice at the Benedictine Monastery of Christ in the Desert in northern New Mexico. He currently works as an academic advisor at Indiana University.
I get nervous when I speak in front of a lot of people. I was in Oxford talking with a professor who asked me about my studies in the U.S. And I said, I was so nervous, I said, I've been stuttering under Dr. Cutsinger. Yeah. So as a recent college graduate, I came to study under Dr. Cutsinger because if you think, as I did at the time, that the Cambridge Platonists are the coolest thing that's happened since Giovanni Pico della Mirandola. Dr. Cutsinger is really the only scholar you can go to study under. Actually, I really came to study under Dr. Cutsinger because my parents, this is a true story, had raised me as a devotee of the Hindu guru Neem Karoli Baba, but baptized me Catholic, and my subsequent godfather was a red meat, strong ale, man-eating Thomist who made Savonarola look like Fred Rogers, for what that's worth. So when I came across Dr. Cutsinger's writings, I thought, aha, this man has lux et claritas. He has it in spades. And if anyone can shed some light on the tangled enigmas lurking in metaphysical penumbras, which inevitably result from a mixed religious upbringing, it's Dr. Cutsinger.
Crazy mixed up Sufi.
That's the crazy mixed up Sufi. But in all seriousness, I found in Dr. Cutsinger's writing the manifest conviction that the love of learning and the desire for God are two sides of the same golden coin, and that scholarship itself is oriented toward union with God. Dr. Cutsinger's eloquent profession of that truth, more than anything else, attracted me to study under him. And in more than one respect, I think this has been mentioned, studying under Dr. Cutsinger was very much like studying under Dr. C.S. Lewis. Not only are they both Christian Platonists, but as with Lewis, entering into a debate with Dr. Cutsinger is like entering a beauty pageant. You had to be prepared to be told that you're damned ugly. Yes, I'm sure you all know exactly what I mean, but Dr. Cutsinger said of his intellectual mentor, John Crosset, that Crosset could see a debate 50 moves in advance. I never found out if that was also true of Dr. Cutsinger, because he always checkmated me in two. Yeah. So during my first year of graduate study, Dr. Cutsinger invited me down to Aiken to celebrate Easter at his Melkite parish. Carol made an incredible Easter meal, and since then the Cutsingers have not been able to get rid of me. I keep showing up, but Carol keeps feeding me, and I think that's the problem. But I hope breakfast is still on tomorrow. Okay, yes, yeah. So there's much more I could say, but the time is short, so let me state in brief. Dr. Cutsinger is a scholar and a gentleman, spiritual seeker, and a philosopher in the true sense. He's a man of great warmth and wit, and his friendship is invaluable. Dr. C, I owe you a great debt of gratitude. Thank you.
We are pleased to have with us today two of our father's original colleagues in the USC Department of Religious Studies, Dr. Carl Evans and Dr. Kevin Lewis, as well as Susan Jones, the wife of another of Dad's colleagues, the late Donald Jones. Dr. Evans joined the department in 1974 and retired in 2009. An Old Testament scholar, he was also the department's longest-serving chairman during Dad's career. Mom and Dad spent their first semester in Columbia in the fall of 1980, living in the Evans' house while Dr. Evans was on sabbatical.
Well, first of all, congratulations, James, on reaching this important milestone. After all these years of laboring in the vineyard of academia, you deserve an extended sabbatical that we usually call retirement. As has been mentioned, James joined the Religious Studies Department in the fall of 1980. He and I were colleagues in that department for 30 years, almost 30 years. We knew we were getting someone very special when we hired James. The department will forever be grateful to him for his gifted teaching, impressive scholarship, and dedication to students. Students consistently praised his teaching and gave his courses the highest evaluations. He richly deserves the many, many teaching awards he received over the years, including the prestigious Michael J. Mungo Distinguished Teacher of the Year Award. James, you now enter a phase of life with its special challenges, health challenges in particular. Consider the months ahead as a gift from the one who is life. Even though for most of his career, James traveled from Aiken to Columbia to meet classes and his students, which meant because of the distance that he normally did not travel to campus every day of the week. And yet, not once in all of those years did a student complain that James was not accessible. And I think I would have heard if there was a complaint. I never did. He always made time for students. And for that, he is to be commended greatly. James' dedication to students will be remembered by the hundreds, no, the thousands of students who studied with him. And the 45 or 50 students who stood up here for the picture are testimony to the influence that James has had on their lives. Their lives will be forever changed by their experience in his classes. On one occasion, a student, a very eccentric student, I should add, walked into James' office, burst into James' office, and announced, "I'm gay." Quick-witted James responded, "And you're Lutheran, too." The student replied, "How did you know?" And James said, "It's written all over your shirt." You remember that, James? We wish you well, my friend. May God bless you in your retirement years. May you find the months, years ahead to be a gift that sets you free. I conclude with a quotation from the Bhagavad Gita. Knowledge is better than practice. Meditation is better than knowledge. And best of all is surrender, which soon brings peace. Peace, peace. May you experience peace in your retirement years, my friend.
Father Cashin Dunlop is a priest of the Antiochian Orthodox Christian Archdiocese and rector of St. Andrew the Apostle Antiochian Church in Eustis, Florida. He grew up in Columbia, met his wife Phyllis at USC, where they both studied and received a BA in philosophy from USC in 1987 and a Bachelor's of Sacred Theology from the St. Joseph of Arimathea Anglican Theological College. He has served churches in California, Washington, D.C., South Carolina, and Florida.
I've always found it impossible to keep up with Dr. Cutsinger when I'm here visiting him. And we go walking in the Hitchcock Woods, and he is like a panther going through the woods. I walk at home, I do the elliptical, lift some weights, but I cannot keep up with him. He eats so healthy, he looks so wonderful, and if there is a vice that is there, but he might say that it is a virtue, it would be those Rebel bars. But chocolate is a taste that is not just inspired, but revealed. And so it doesn't seem fair in a way that he has to wrestle with some of the challenges that he now has, because he is so full of life. But I know that he will continue to be full of abundant life in this world and into the next. I had a few professors who invited me into their homes, and would get to know them and have dinner with them and so forth. But it's Dr. Cutsinger who invited me and so many others into his life. And we became part of his life, and he became part of ours. He's godfather to my son Nicholas, and came to know his family so well, to love them. I remember the very place I was sitting in his classroom when he handed back my paper, and I had written in a place in this paper, I don't even remember what the thesis of it was, and I remember this whenever I read this in Scripture. What is it that he ascended, but that he also descended into the lower parts of the earth? And he had written there in the margin, one of many places, of course, in red, that I should read Philip Sherrard, The Greek East and the Latin West. Okay, well, I guess I will do that. He didn't say you must read this, or you need to understand this, or this is the direction you should go in, but you should read this. And I asked him about it. He said, well, you might think about some of the things that are in there. So I did read it. I did think about it, and here I am. It was one of the turning points in my life. But there was nothing pushy about that in the least, and yet it was so important to me. He's had such a way of teaching that he does not always know the profound impact that he has upon his students, I think. The material and the love that comes through in his teaching. At one point in my life, I had, while studying under him, a crisis that I won't go into what it was, but I simply went into his class, and it was on Boethius and the consolation of philosophy. And everything was resolved. Everything was made clear by what was set forth in his class. He had that way about him. I remember in class one time someone asking him simply the question, and it was a new student, Dr. Cutsinger, do you believe in God? And he quoted, I think it was Carl Jung, I don't have to believe, I know. And it was intended as a provocative sort of comment to lead one to further thought, of course, not as a final statement on the issue. But in practical application, I found all of these teachings to be of great import as a priest. You might say practical application in the field, on the ground. Sometimes personal faith boils down to just this: the will to hold on to what we know to be true. If we have at some point known God and known his love for us and that he knows us, then we can come back to that. Whatever pain we are feeling, whatever difficulty we have. And my point here is that that has helped many people in my ministry over time and in various places to point out to them in various ways that they can hold on to through belief the knowledge of God that they have had. And so his teaching has touched the lives of many people. Dr. Cutsinger doesn't know this, I think, but there are marriages that have held together, but people he does not know because of his teachings. There are lives that have been saved because of him. To say that Dr. Cutsinger has enriched my life and those of my family members is very true, and it's also an understatement. He has helped to preserve lives and to transform the lives of people that he has not met in this world. And so I'm immensely grateful to God for the gift of knowing him, and also for the impact that he has had on countless other people.
I'm going to introduce Ashley Kalaya. Ashley was our father's student nearly every semester, she says, from the fall of 2002 to the spring of 2006. He was also chair of her honors project committee and awarded her the Elizabeth Dodge Clark Book Prize her senior year. Ashley works as a curator for the media organization TED, overseeing programming for TED Ed, a global initiative which supports students all over the world in discovering, developing, and sharing their ideas. She lives in San Francisco and often works in New York.
I will travel very far to be acknowledged as the person who has traveled the furthest. I really love gatherings like this, world colliding type of gatherings. There's something that feels so very full about it, a sort of cup runneth overness about it. And it is an honor to be in this room. It is a level of imposter syndrome that I have not experienced in quite some time that I'm having right now, but it is an honor to be here. I grew up in New Jersey and South Carolina, so religion to me was first christenings and confirmations, bar and bat mitzvahs, and then young life and guitar songs about Jesus. And as a 13 to 17-year-old, it seemed to me like these practices were missing some bigger, more important point. It seemed very illogical, very anti-intellectual to me. You must be thinking, wow, she was so smart. That's certainly what I thought. In most of my adolescence, I thought that my beliefs must have been true because I am smart. So smart, in fact, so skilled in literature understanding and grammar pro to boot. I had A's in every class. And as a freshman university student, I was able to credit out of all those English 101 courses and instead able to choose an advanced elective. So smart that I was able to explore real topics like religion and philosophy in my first year of college. And during my very first semester of this ambitious intellectual adventure that I was so well suited for, on Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2:30 to 3:45 p.m. in Rutledge 102, I took my very first Great Books seminar. We read Socrates, Plato, Boethius, Kant, and I was finally a real college intellectual, finally immersed in a world that could actually hold my attention because it too was smart. And in that first semester of my new life, Dr. James S. Cutsinger gave me my very first D on a paper. I don't think I'd ever really noticed, really considered the color red before I got that paper back. Every line I'd written had some violent red scratch, some copy editing symbol I'd never seen before, but even so, could tell that it was shorthand for a very professorial version of, come on, really? And for the first time ever, I was forced to sit with that, come on, really? Forced to acknowledge it, to reckon with it, and to make a choice about what to do with it. So naturally, I made the only choice a freshman university student in way over her head and terrified of bad grades could possibly make. Every year, if not every semester. From then on, I took whatever course Dr. James S. Cutsinger was teaching. And I asked him to be my academic advisor and to chair my honors thesis committee. I ended up with a degree in religious studies that I had not sought out to acquire, and ended up baptized into the Orthodox Church, a decision that surprised literally everyone who knows me, including myself. My world was turned upside down and inside out in those years. Everything I thought I knew turned out to either be false or some fractal, some fraction of a much greater, grander, bigger, capital T truth. And what an honor, the honor of a lifetime really, to be given a peek behind the curtain of your own ignorance by someone as generous of spirit as Dr. C. Dr. C, I have been blessed with many teachers in my life who have challenged and inspired me, took an interest in and believed in me. You, though, are the first person who ever looked me straight through and asked more of me. And in so doing, both presumed that I had a more to give and inspired me to consider what more might actually mean and how much of it there might actually be. I mentioned colliding worlds before. Dr. Cutsinger collided my world with God, almost as if someone had put together a very fine gathering and intentionally crafted the guest list just so, and throughout the evening found subtle ways to spur conversation that was inviting but not overwhelming, vulnerable but not too exposing, cultivated connection, but also allowed intimacy to develop on its own. And now, sir, you are embedded in the very life story that I tell. A signal in any conversation that I have with any new person that my connection with them is about to deepen, to become more real. Because in talking about the role that you've played in my life, I am sharing both what I've been and what I am, and also hinting at what I hope to become. And also sharing my irrational phobia of red Sharpie. Dr. C, I think often not just of you, but of your life and this world colliding that you do. Nearly every time I walk into church, which admittedly is not as often as I'd like and is always 15 minutes later than is appropriate, Father Mark, I consider the number of worlds that you've collided and the number of life stories in which you appear. And I consider the infinite, eternal amount of more yet to come. Thank you.
Dr. Michael Dixon is the next speaker I'm going to introduce. Dr. Michael Dixon arrived at USC as a freshman in 1986, and that very year took his first course with Dad on the topic of Dad's dissertation, Samuel Taylor Coleridge. Over the next 4 years, he says he took something like 5 or 6 courses with our father, who also served as a reader on his honors thesis. Dr. Dixon went on to graduate school at the University of Notre Dame and Cambridge University, took a job at Indiana University, and in 2004 returned as a professor in USC's Department of Philosophy. A university colleague of Dad's, he later became his commiserator, as they both served as department chairs.
Yes, I took a class in 1986. I was not only my first year, my first semester. It was a 400 level South Carolina college course. I had no business being in. And it turned out to be an astonishing course for me in a variety of ways. I won't enumerate all of them, but one way in which it was astonishing was the book. It's called Biographia Literaria. What a great name for a book. And you open this book up, and there'd be 2 to 6 lines of text written by Coleridge, followed by, what would you say, 10 to 40 lines of footnotes. And this was astonishing to me. I'd never seen this kind of scholarship before. I didn't know anything about Coleridge going into the class. I knew Xanadu, Kubla Khan, Stately Pleasure Dome Decree, and that was about it. And you look at the footnotes, and a whole world of scholarship opens up, and you think, how could one person, the editor of this book, know so much? How could they know so much that in 6 lines of text, they have 40 lines of things to say about that 6 lines of text? And these things would be drawn from Coleridge's life, his poetry, chemistry, math, all over the place. And yet somehow it all fit together. The other astonishing thing about the class was that the discussion was the same way. So we would read 6 lines of text, and then we would have an hour and a half of discussion about it. And that discussion would draw on philosophy, theology, ethics, chemistry, whatever. And this was astonishing to me. And I think it's because of that experience, I think that I actually became, eventually, through a roundabout way, a philosophy professor. I'm pretty sure it wouldn't have happened without that class. That's not an exaggeration. So I know who to blame. And really, that's the lesson that I learned from James, is the unity of knowledge. That all of it somehow fits together. We don't always see how it fits together, but somehow it fits together. And there's a kind of faith in that proposition, at least, that I think has driven my own work in my own life. I was trying to think about how to sum all that up. And James and I recently started the conversation. He's been better about it than I have. I'm still a department chair. 28 more days. I'm not counting or anything, but it's 28 more days. About chant, topic dear to both of our hearts. And I did notice the word vanilla about a particular brand of chant that I happen to like, but we'll talk about that later. And so I thought, well, here's how I'm going to end with, you'll have to forgive me for the vanilla. But this is how I think of the effect that James has had on me and so many of the other students. Hosanna, Filio David, benedictus, qui venit in nomine Domini, Rex Israel, Hosanna in excelsis.
As already mentioned, two of our father's initial colleagues in the Department of Religious Studies are with us today. The second is Dr. Kevin Lewis, who joined the department in 1973, retiring in 2015. Dr. Lewis's teaching and research contributions cross the boundaries between religion, literature, and the arts. Not just an academic colleague, he was also a regular competitor of Dad's on the USC squash courts for many years.
Jim and I had been colleagues in that small department on the third floor or second floor of Rutledge College on the Horseshoe. And I have such a good memory of not just the peacefulness of that department, as I think Carl could verify as well. We got along together. There were no big arguments. We saved that for trying to inspire our students, as Dr. Cutsinger has done as well. But a good memory of heading off to conferences in a car, all 4 or 5 of us together. Don Jones, Hal French, Carl, myself, Jim, and getting to know each other a little bit better that way, but not too much. Those students of his, and you keep hearing them, have been so inspired by Jim. I kind of regret that I wasn't in their place at some points in classrooms in his office, being inspired by him as well. We all have our own vision of life. And when you're older, when you get that, it's a little bit harder to let it go. But I kind of wish I'd had more interaction with Dr. Cutsinger. I think that would have made my intellectual life even more stimulating than it has been, and it has been. I have peaceful memories of those 30-plus years, especially of Jim as being a quiet, subdued contributor to departmental meetings. We had other people, other colleagues who were full of it. Some of you know Hal French. He was never lost for words. But Jim was kind of retiring. He let us do our thing. He was subdued. He let us be who we were and wanted to be. So there was a little less exchange there. There may have been more exchange, intellectual exchange, outside departmental meetings. But I'm afraid he went off to, where are we? He went home all these miles, and we were living in Columbia, so there wasn't a lot of interaction among us. I wish there had been more, especially now that I hear all the testimonies that you have offered us. Well, I keep making notes to myself, but what I want to do, and I don't want to take too long, is try out with you a sonnet. I was inspired. I keep trying to find more inspiration to write verse, and this opportunity to go to me to try a sonnet. So I'm going to very slowly go through those lines. How many lines do they have? 14? Okay. That's all it is. That's going to be me. It's going to be my contribution to this occasion. This is to Jim, June 2nd, 2018. Listener, teacher, prophet, our chair, good friend. Of your resilience, there should be no end. But now, as circumstances mix and trend, bad luck in health has configured a sign, scorning hermeneutics line by no line. How can we be at peace as you resign? I'm already resigned right now. I'm out of it as far as the diminished department is concerned. How can we be at peace as you resign? Admired, loyal, your persisting vision, Shuan, Coleridge, Mount Athos, salute you. Many have profited from your mission. Our students and colleagues, and your readers too. Sufism, gnosis, that knowing spirit, Sophia Perennis, is yours at home. Let us all explore how we are of it. Love to you, Jim. Do give us at least another tome in retirement.
Dr. Michael Allen studied with our father at Rosehill College during the academic year 1996 to 97, and then at the University of South Carolina from 1997 to 2001. He went on to receive his PhD in religion from Harvard University in 2013 and is currently an assistant professor in the Department of Religious Studies at the University of Virginia. Dr. Allen's wife, Elizabeth, was a student of Dad's as well.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here, and thank you especially Mrs. Cutsinger for organizing this. It's wonderful to see many people I haven't seen in a long time. So as you just heard, my formal studies began with Dr. Cutsinger at Rosehill College, 1996 to 97, which remains the best year of education I ever received in my entire life. But my informal studies began a year earlier when, as Mrs. Cutsinger said, so often the personal home life and then professional life blended together. And Dr. Cutsinger hosted a reading group in his home. That's when I first met him. I think I was 15 at the time. I previously to that been dropped off as a baby on Father Martin Mancuso's doorstep, the joke. And we read from St. Athanasius's On the Incarnation. And this was my first introduction to Dr. Cutsinger, but also to Dr. Cutsinger's teaching. And I remember this so well because we spent close to 2 hours reading just the first paragraph, and that was it. And to my memory, there were no digressions. 2 hours, just on the first paragraph. So since that first reading group, I've learned so much from Dr. Cutsinger over the years. Beginning with that, he taught me how to read. As you've heard others testify as well, he's taught me how to write. I will always treasure, I keep in a box in the basement, my one and only paper I received from Dr. Cutsinger that received the mark of NAAB, or not at all bad. Keep that paper alongside many more papers with the grade of NAAG. So he taught me to read, he taught me to write, and he also taught me how to think. But most importantly, I think of all, he taught me that true knowledge, as opposed to mere opinion, requires not just an operation of the mind, but a commitment of our whole being. And I don't think we got this far in St. Athanasius and on the Incarnation, because at that pace we only got a few pages in after several weeks. But at the very end of that book, St. Athanasius says, one cannot possibly understand the teaching of the saints unless one has a pure mind and is trying to imitate their life. And I think that's one of the greatest lessons Dr. Cutsinger taught me and so many other people, that it's not just this mental life, but that mental life has to be accompanied by striving for virtue. So for all these lessons, I'm more grateful than words can express. I have only one complaint, which I'll register here in jest, and that's that the one thing Dr. Cutsinger didn't teach me is how to teach. Only now that I've become a teacher myself do I realize that what he made seem so effortless is in fact really, really hard. Right? And I think for so long, I thought the Socratic method that he's such a master of was really about the method, and I realize now that that's not really true. As in Plato's dialogues, the Socratic method relies so much on Socrates himself. And I think too with Dr. Cutsinger's classes, I thought, now I'm going to start teaching, I'll just do Socratic method, and then I realized, oh, this is really, really hard. So when I think about this style that Dr. Cutsinger, as I say, so mastered, I think of, from the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu's description of the ideal ruler, talking about government, but I think this applies to Dr. Cutsinger's teaching as well. When the master governs, or teaches, the people are hardly aware that he exists. He acts without acting. When his work is done, the people say, amazing, we did it all by ourselves. As I say, I think I got through many years thinking, oh, we just read good books. Dr. Cutsinger led us through these materials, but it was really just us working hard. And now I realize actually how much he was doing that I didn't even realize he was doing. So I wish I could go back now and sit in on one of his classes, not to learn about what we were reading, not to learn about Plato or Aristotle or the Gospel of St. John, but just as a master class in teaching. Unfortunately, my students instead will have to settle with a pale imitation, as well as the stories I tell them. Just as I heard stories of Dr. Cutsinger's mentor, John Crossett, my students will have to settle with the stories I tell them of my own mentor, friend, and guide, Dr. James Cutsinger, the wisest and best man I know. Thank you.
E.A. Matthews is our next speaker. E.A. Matthews was a Stamp Scholar in the University of South Carolina Honors College from 2014 to 2018, graduating this past month with a major in English and a minor in religious studies. Her courses with Dad included 3 honor seminars: The Mind's Eye, The Oxford Inklings, and Mysteries of the Christian East. Depending on the day, she hopes to teach English literature at either the high school or collegiate level.
After Mrs. Cutsinger asked me to speak at this occasion, I sat in front of my computer screen for a long time, daunted by this last Cutsinger essay, which was somehow just as difficult as all the others. How was I to provide a fitting tribute in less than 4 minutes? How was I supposed to convey how much Dr. Cutsinger has meant to me and so many others, while abstaining from the flowery generalizations that he would surely detest? So because broad generalities fail at such a time, I've decided to provide a brief sketch of my time in Cutsinger courses, hoping to give you a glimpse of the teacher who has shaped so many lives. I first encountered Dr. Cutsinger's Socratic seminars at my honors advising appointment during the 2nd semester of my freshman year. My advisor, who happened to be Dean Lynn, thank you, Dean Lynn, told me that this particular religious studies professor was very difficult, but also said that he had a cult-like following, which I thought was a peculiar description at the time. Further research on the perennially unreliable Rate My Professor website revealed further expressions of devotion. Anonymous pupils posted comments such as, "I would follow this man to whatever end." These statements echoed the slightly cultish sensibilities of Cutsinger students that my advisor described, and I was so curious that I signed up for a course, completely unaware of what I was getting myself into. For entering a Cutsinger course for the first time, especially one of his honor seminars, is an experience that is comparable to drinking out of an industrial-strength fire hose. Even on the first day of class, when other professors were reading syllabi and attempting to call the roll, we were engaged in a discussion about a text entitled The Mysteries of Consciousness, a challenging task for someone with little prior knowledge on the subject like myself. As the semester progressed, however, I found myself enchanted by the course, and promptly added a religious studies minor so that I could take more of them. Like many other students, I succumbed to the siren call of the Socratic seminar. But Dr. Cutsinger's courses were more than a mere intellectual exercise. He was after something deeper and thicker and richer than that. During my time at USC, I've been fortunate enough to have many excellent instructors. But there is something about Dr. James Cutsinger that is profoundly different. There is something special about the way that he invites students over to his home for dinner, the way he gives you a sly smile as he returns your correction-covered paper, the way he allows dorky undergraduates to come over during the summer to discuss Boethius's Consolation of Philosophy, the way that he patiently explains to a bullheaded South Carolina Protestant the beauty of liturgy and holy mystery. I read a book last week that meditated on the statement, "The heart cannot love what the mind does not know." And although Dr. Cutsinger has never actually said this to me, I think that this phrase embodies what is so different about his academic work. Dr. Cutsinger is not an instructor who merely relays information. He structures his courses in a way that leads to a more profound sense of truth. This is not because he wishes to create ideological mini-me's. It is motivated by a deep love of the Lord and by extension, his students. For you see, that is what is so different about him. All of it, the discussions about the nature of God and the nature of consciousness, assorted essays by the Inklings, trips to monasteries in Arizona that continue to reverberate in our minds. All of it is to point us towards the truth. He cares about the spiritual lives of his students in a way that I have never seen any other person do before. In his classroom, I never felt like a warm body that he must attend to before he got back to his research. I felt like a human with a soul whose thoughts about theology and philosophy mattered because they were so intimately connected to the heart. And I think that this is why students in Cutsinger's class became such close friends and became so devoted to their teacher. Our hearts could love what our minds now knew. This blend of faith and intellectualism allowed for students' lives to be shaped and molded in ways I have not seen in any other college classroom. And so, on behalf of the many students you've had over the past 37 years, I would like to express the gratitude that not only echoes across this room and across this nation, but into the very pages of eternity. Thank you.
Father Mark Mancuso. The order of these introductions was structured specifically so that I could be at the podium for this moment. Just so you know. Father Mark Mancuso was a USC undergraduate from 1988 to 1992, taking a number of courses with our dad and majoring in religious studies. He also holds a Master's of Library and Information Science degree from the university. Father Mark has been rector of St. Elizabeth Orthodox Church in Colombia, a parish of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia since 2000. He and his wife, Matushka Ann, were both students of Dad's. I would be remiss if I failed to mention that Dad once asked me, I must have been 10 or 11,
32.
who was the most handsome man in the world? My response, Mark Mancuso. As you will see momentarily, little has changed.
If anybody has been around Orthodox, can y'all hear me? If anybody's been around Orthodox, you know that we pray before we pray. So I'm going to talk before I talk. Yes. I got a text message from Carol. That said everybody has 4 minutes. But I wanted to respond with a quotation from St. Augustine. I know what time is, but when you ask me, I don't. So what I read was everyone else has 4 minutes. I too babysat the Cutsinger children. And one time James babysat one of my children. Ashley, where are you, Ashley? My first paper, C-. I win. And I also baptized her. My plan today is to share with you 4 things I've learned from Dr. James Cutsinger. 4 things that influence everything that I do every day of my life and that I use in my ministry as an Orthodox priest. But before I begin, I beg your forgiveness if my address sounds like a sermon. It's an occupational hazard. Now, forget it. After much struggle and a few years of studying with Dr. Cutsinger, it finally came together that I not only understood what I'd been taught, mostly through the Socratic method, but had begun to live accordingly. Noting the progress that I had made, James said to me, "You've got it." After a short pause, he added, "Now forget it." No doubt the reason for these additional words were to keep me from pride. But the way he said them cut me to my very core. It's hard to describe how these words were offered. The best description I can come up with is that his words were a cross between a simple statement of fact and a stern admonition. They were comforting words that at the same time made me uncomfortable. To this day, when someone tells me something good about myself, my soul is taken to a recollection of James' comforting but uncomfortable words. I thus don't ever feel safe letting the laudatory utterances reside in me, and I quickly attempt to put them into proper perspective, remembering Christ's words from the end of John 15:5, "Without me, you can do nothing." One day, during our Wednesday morning walks in Hitchcock Woods in 1996, James said to me, "Always consider what you are saying, why you are saying it, and to whom you are saying it." I can't remember what inspired him to say this to me. I'm sort of glad I can't remember. But it has stuck with me ever since. This counsel of his, upon reflection, was charged with multiple teachings. First is watchfulness, as the Greek fathers would say. We must be watchful over ourselves and guard our hearts and intellect, lest we be led into pride and anger, as St. Isaiah the Solitary instructs. Second, the intention behind our words must be pure and serve a spiritually edifying purpose. Our words must not be idle talk, as St. Ephrem the Syrian warns us as he prays that such words be taken from us. And third, in remembering with whom we are speaking, we should be charitable and consider how our words will resonate with our interlocutor. In the words of St. Paul, "Though I speak with the tongues of men and of angels and have not charity, I have become as a sounding brass or a tinkling cymbal." The Lord's Prayer. While grappling with becoming a traditionally minded man as an undergraduate, I had to reconsider so much of how my time was being spent. Which activities of mine were spiritually edifying, which were neutral, and which required abstention and renunciation. Many times I asked James for guidance in this. Eventually, he gave me the following advice. If you can say the Our Father inwardly, carefully considering every word in the midst of an activity, then it's probably an activity that will not be spiritually harmful. I immediately applied this counsel, and discerning such things became easier. I now give similar advice to my spiritual children using the same principle. I tell them, if you can make the sign of the cross carefully and with intention before an activity, thereby giving it sanction according to Christ, and if you can do the same at the end, thus offering it to Christ, then it's not a spiritually harmful thing. The cross is, as we sing in its Kentuckian hymn, a weapon of peace, an invincible trophy. Merciful grading, a metaphor for the spiritual life. In the first class I took from James, Christ and Christian Doctrine, he had a unique way of grading, and that grading scheme, for the most part, was the scheme I experienced during my undergraduate days with him. The goal in his class was for the student to master his ability to think through and articulate the subject. For most of us, mastery is not a starting point. Mercifully, the grade on your final exam or paper, if it was your highest grade for the class, that would become your grade. In other words, your grade was not an average of your marks at the various stages of the semester. Rather, it was how you ended up that mattered. Again, mercifully, if you ended poorly, he would average your grade so that your grade would be respectable. But this idea of focusing on mastery and how you finish is a perfect metaphor for the spiritual life, and one that is encouraging. Despair can be avoided knowing that we are works in progress, and forgiveness of others comes more easily knowing that we are works in progress. Reflecting on 29 years I've known James, our relationship has changed. When I met him, he was a friendly teacher who invited me to see what he saw and uncover what he was uncovering. Now he's my friend who's a teacher, and this transfiguration of our relationship affords me the opportunity to share what I have as a priest with him, those things that I wouldn't have if it weren't for him. To my dear friend, James, I'm humbled to have been chosen to say a few good things about you. But now, my friend, forget it. And finish your work. And of course, thank you, and I love you.
Carson recently completed the first year of a Master's of Divinity degree at Duke Divinity School. He hopes to be ordained as a United Methodist elder and to pursue doctoral work in early Christian studies.
There seems to be a bit of a competition about who got the lowest first grade. My first Cutsinger paper I got back in the honors section at the end of the systematic theology course did not receive a letter grade, nor did any of those of my classmates. We had so greatly sinned, that is, missed the mark, that we got checks, minuses, neutrals. We didn't deserve letter grades at that point. As I stand towards the tail end of a long line of people to graduate from the Religious Studies program at USC with a Bachelor of Arts in Cutsinger Studies, I am sure that many of you in this room have similar sets of stories to those that I do. Dr. Cutsinger's frequent appeals to C.S. Lewis so that evangelicals would know he was in fact still a Christian. His red pen, which poured profusely throughout my career. When Mrs. C asked me to send in some papers to show in the slideshow, I sent in both my first paper and my last paper, showing that the treatment never abated. And finally, the carefully chosen Socratic questions, after which, having prepared a careful argument to show the class how brilliant you were, he would just ask this one question, and the whole thing fell apart before your eyes, before the eyes of your classmates, and you realized maybe you weren't quite as smart as you thought you were. But today, given this immense body of experience that we all share, I'd like to extol one particular virtue in this uncharacteristically concise encomium, at least for this budding preacher. Dr. Cutsinger has exemplified patience from the first day I met him. As he had been assigned to be my scholar mentor, I scheduled a meeting with him soon after arriving on campus. When he asked me about my religious background, I began to spew forth evangelical jargon and buzzwords for what must have seemed like an eternity. And he bore it very patiently. He might have been slightly amused. I can't remember. I was too busy erupting. He was patient when in the first paper we turned in, which for me was a triumphant rebuttal of Ken Ham, I so insolently and intentionally conflated perennialism and syncretism. I'm sorry. He was patient with me as my writing progressed in fits and starts instead of leaps and bounds. I was surprised to learn when I got to Duke that I'd actually turned into a good writer at some point. I turned in my first year writing experience, or writing assessment, and she actually thought I knew what I was doing, which is something I had never received the impression of while I was at USC. He was patient with my Baptist classmates and their stubborn inability to understand how the Orthodox just weren't hung up on justification. He's been patient as I refused to stop, to borrow a metaphor from Pavel Florensky, splashing about in the Methodist kiddie pool and leap into the deep end of orthodoxy. He's been patient as the neologisms in the air and water at Duke have crept into my email correspondence. But most of all, he's patiently pointed his students towards the truth as best he could, as he had found it after a lifetime of searching after it, no matter how strange or esoteric it might have seemed to some of those students at the time. So thank you for your patience, and thank you for asking me to speak. It's been an honor.
Emily Theus is our next speaker, another Carolina scholar. Emily Theus was a student at USC from 2011 to 2015, bravely withstanding the scrutiny of being the only woman in a small honors class of dads called Perspectives on Consciousness in the fall of her freshman year. Since graduating from USC, she has been at Yale Divinity School, where she just finished a Master's of Arts degree in religion with a concentration in theology. Next year, she will be back at Yale, starting a PhD program in theology through the Religious Studies Department.
The first course I took with Dr. Cutsinger was a train wreck. Now, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the course itself. The problem was that I probably should not have ended up in that classroom to begin with. I had haplessly wandered my way into a rather advanced honors seminar on consciousness my first semester in college. The professor seemed nice enough, but here I was, the only freshman, the only female student, completely in over her head in a course that was small enough to meet in a circle of chairs in an office with nowhere to hide. Never in my life had I found myself with nothing to say in class, yet week after week I would sit in silence thinking that perhaps studying religion was not for me. Lest you think this was just a small inconvenience in my semester, I'll share this. It got to the point that each week before class, my friends, which were my new friends, mind you, because I had just started college, would write me encouraging notes in a surprising number of haikus, when I go back and look at them, on sticky notes to help get me hyped up to go to class and maybe actually say something. By the end of the semester, I had a whole wall covered in them, and I still have them in my closet back home because they're very dear to me. The point of bringing this up is not to say this class I took with Cutsinger made me miserable. This class, frustrating though it was, became one of the most formative moments that set me on the path that I'm on now. Because somehow, Dr. Cutsinger still saw something in me beyond my paralysis and confusion. When an entire class would pass with me saying nothing, he would email me to check in, to see how I was feeling about things, to ask what he could do to help. He met with me countless times, and he worked to make space for me in class discussion. So you see, all of this is, by the way, evidence that he didn't get all those teaching awards for nothing. In the end, I scraped out a B. You would think that might have been it for me and studying religion, or at least for me in studying religion with this particular professor who expected so much from us, who graded papers so very strictly, and who assigned such impenetrable tests. But I left the course feeling oddly encouraged. Sure, I'd blown my chance of ever having a 4.0 in college, but my grade was hard-earned, and behind it was a professor who I knew believed I was capable of much, much more. This is only one example of my experience as one of Dr. Cutsinger's students. There are many other things I could get into. For example, that my Cutsinger brand religious studies degree means that I know about some weird figures and topics that many of my classmates at Yale did not encounter in their own undergraduate programs. That I occasionally find myself explaining to people that yes, I've been out west, but no, I've not been to the Grand Canyon because I spent the whole time at monasteries, but that it was totally worth it. That I majored in both religious studies and math, largely due to Dr. Cutsinger's encouragement that, and I quote, "It's a bit weird, but so are you." Much has changed. I am now plenty talkative in class, male-female ratio be damned. Yet even now, I occasionally find myself thinking, as I say or write something, particularly when that something is woefully Reformed or Protestant in nature, I think to myself, good Lord, Cutsinger would hate this. And then I say or write it anyway. I like to think that what these moments lack in Dr. Cutsinger's theological sensibilities, they make up for in carrying forward some of his bold and sometimes stubborn theological spirit. Because Dr. Cutsinger always invited our disagreement, provided we back it up with strong and clear arguments. So even if I never write another page about Alan Watts or Owen Barfield or Gurdjieff or any of those guys I'll be writing his courses, I will always bear with me the impulse towards ever greater clarity and precision in my work. It is this impulse, coupled with a vote of confidence given to a quiet and overwhelmed freshman, that has brought me to where I am today, and that I think will continue to carry me forward as I take my next big academic step. So, thank you very much, Dr. Cutsinger.
Our last speaker is Dr. Richard McCombs. Like Dr. Michael Dixon, was a student in our father's Coleridge Seminar in the fall of 1986. He received his bachelor's degree from USC in 1990 before going on to complete a PhD in philosophy at Fordham University. Dr. McCombs was a fellow teacher of Dad's at Rose Hill College during the academic year 96-97, and since 1999 has taught in the legendary Great Books curriculum of St. John's College in Santa Fe, New Mexico. His wife, Acacia, was one of Dad's students as well.
I owe a great debt to James Cutsinger. He introduced me to my wife with matchmaking intent. He is the best man that I know, and the best teacher that I've ever had. From him, or with his help, I learned the most important things that I have learned. He's the most generous, the most inspiring, and the most encouraging teacher I've ever had, and the best example of a teacher that I've ever had. He helped me so much that I wanted to follow his example and imitate it and become a teacher myself. And so the question naturally arose, how do you teach like James Cutsinger? And in particular, how do you be a dialectician? How do you teach Socratically? I've asked him over the years, some, and his answer is something like this. He probably could correct me, but he doesn't know how to say how he does it. I agree with Michael Allen, it's very hard to do it. So I have thought a lot about how Dr. Cutsinger does what he does. And to introduce my thoughts on that, I'll tell you a classification of people that James once told me. He who knows not and knows not that he knows not is a fool. Shun him. He who knows not and knows that he knows not is a student. Teach him. He who knows and knows not that he knows is an artist. Watch him. He who knows and knows that he knows is a teacher. Follow him. So according to that classification scheme, Dr. Cutsinger is an artist, at least qua teacher. And that makes sense. Perhaps all of the greatest teachers are artists, and teaching cannot be reduced to a science. So these are some of the things that I recall seeing as I tried to watch Dr. Cutsinger teaching artfully. The general idea is that I think he skillfully combines and coordinates opposite actions and qualities. I'll begin somewhat humbly. He's a very serious man, and he's utterly focused on the most serious things or the most serious being. And yet, he's warm and playful and sometimes even childlike. He laughs a lot. Another way of thinking about the opposites that he combines is that he is stable but also flexible and graceful. I'll make that more specific. I have never met anyone who claims to know as much about important things as James Cutsinger claims to know. But I have never been listened to by anyone as I have been listened to by James, even though I don't know much about those serious things. He listens to me as though I did. I've never had anyone take what I said as seriously as he did. I've never been attended to in the way that James Cutsinger attended to what I had to say. And I don't know what to say about that. It's corny, but it meant an amazing amount to me to be attended to in that way. I teach at St. John's, as Trevor said, and we use exclusively Socratic pedagogy. And so I think about Socratic pedagogy quite a lot, and I use Dr. Cutsinger as my model. And this is one way I've come to think about it. I think that Dr. Cutsinger, when he goes to class, is always ready to give an excellent lecture on the topic. And sometimes that's what he does. But when he's teaching Socratically, he's able to put that somehow in the background and to follow the argument or the inquiry or the logos, wherever it leads. And to listen attentively to the students and to adapt to their needs and to pay attention to their questions. And it's very difficult for someone who knows something to do that with people who don't know as much. So I think that that combination of great preparedness and graceful accommodation and flexibility is an amazing achievement. I am very grateful to Dr. Cutsinger for his teaching and for his example. Thank you.
So let's see if I can talk without crying this time. There were two little surprises tonight that James didn't know about. The first was the York peppermint patties on the table, which is one of his favorite little treats. And there's another little surprise here. There's a dear friend of his who wanted so desperately to come tonight and wasn't able to come. So he sent me an email a couple days ago, and he said, "I've written James a poem. And at the end of the program, I would like for you to hand this poem to him and have him read it." So this is an offering from Papa Rossi.
Everybody's making me cry, and that's not fair. Give me a second. The author of this poem has been a friend of mine for about 30 years. Taught with me at Rose Hill, and after he was widowed a few years ago, is now a monk in a monastery in California. This monastic stuff keeps coming up again and again and again, doesn't it? You must align your stars to meet a man who knows the art of making by the law in which we're made. So Cutsinger found Crosset and Lewis his great knock. Then, struck by intellective lightning, fan that spark. Inspired by Platonic awe, become a dialectic gunslinger, enlivening minds with anamnetic shock. With wisdom from St. John of Carthage's clan, educe the noose from passion's mindless claw, and thus, Socratic, Gnostic light bringer, the soul's remembered certainties unlock. The master teacher, by unknowing, knows the truth of spirits, paracletic flows. Our second sonnet today. I must say, I feel rather like Tom Sawyer listening to the eulogy at his own funeral. Though, of course, as you may remember, Tom did it in secret. And I've been sitting here right out in the open all afternoon. You have to admit there's something a little ridiculous about celebrating the work of a man whose work involved very little work at all, but who spent most of his time simply enjoying himself. And that's me and Tom. But there's also something more than a little dangerous about it. We all know that pride goeth before a fall. And it's said in the Christian monastic tradition that to praise a man is to send the devil after him. So in the interest of eluding that ancient tempter, I'd like to pour some cooling words of thanks over the simmering coals of self-importance. Thanks to those who put up with me. Thanks to someone without whom my abilities might have had little direction. Thanks to those who have helped me to hone whatever strengths I might have. And thanks to those who were that one who gave me the strengths in the first place. That sounds complicated, I'll keep it pretty short. First, I want to thank my family, especially the creative and organizational mastermind behind this retirement party, my beloved and long-suffering wife. I'm perfectly aware it wasn't easy living with someone whose so-called job involved eating and breathing and dreaming big ideas, and who couldn't and still can't wait to get back to his books and his musings. Thank you for your patience. As for the MCs this afternoon, my children, Leah, Kellen, Trevor, all I can say is that I realize cross-examining children about their philosophical assumptions before their second teeth have begun to come in is unusual, if not in fact cruel. In any case, my thanks and abiding love to you all, wife and progeny, as well as to your dear spouses, Tommy, Emily, Alex. Thank you. Second, it's impossible for me to utter this last word without naming the man who's been named several times already, the classicist that I mentioned in the program, John Crosset. It's already been mentioned how, as I have told my students all of these years, this is the man in whose own shadow I'm just a pale, pale nothing, who could see, as someone mentioned, where the students would end up 50 moves in advance. Over the years, he's always been, this Crosset man has always been, in my own mental rearview mirror every time I walked into a classroom, so my thanks to him. I was no Crosset, let alone Socrates, in spite of what these people have said. But I did try to follow their examples. Those who have tried their hands at this pedagogy, and Richard and Michael have said as much, know that it's due, what success one might have is due to one's pupils, as much as it is or more to the teacher. And with that fact in mind, I'm obliged. Thirdly, more than obliged, I'm delighted to register my thanks to all the students who showed up in my classes over the past 37 years, especially those of you who are here today. Thank you for your friendship and your encouragement, for your insights, and for your passion for truth. Finally, and this is obviously a case of last but not least, I'm deeply grateful to all the powers of heaven for allowing me to have such a wonderful life and career. A Zen Buddhist master once told me that many people, he was speaking in a kind of shorthand about karma and the doctrine of rebirth. Many people, he said, had worked very hard to bring me to the brink of my current life. Whether he was right about that, or whether it's all owing instead to the compassion of a single providential deity, or whether, again, these are simply two ways of saying the same thing, I leave for some future round of Socratic discussion. What I know for sure is that I'm blessed beyond words to have been given a span of years on this planet in which work and play and family and friends and opportunities for spiritual development have been so seamlessly interwoven. My list could go on, but I will test your patience by naming all the human beings and other conscious entities I feel beholden to. I'll simply end with this prayer. Whenever we lapse into thinking that our egos actually deserve the sort of celebration I'm enjoying here today, may we be reminded, all of us, of our continuing debts to all those who have helped us become what we are. And may this memory keep the devil at bay. Thank you for listening. And now, if I've understood correctly, a buffet supper is about to begin, during which, as Carol has said, this microphone will remain live for anyone wishing to offer a few words, critical words, given what I just said about the devil. First, though, a blessing before the meal. We're fortunate today, not only in having a surfeit of potential speakers, more than we could fit into this program, of course, but also in having as our guest a significant number of clergy. So here also some downsizing was called for. With apologies to the others, we've asked Proto-Presbyter Michael Platanis, Dean of Holy Trinity Greek Orthodox Cathedral in Columbia, to bless the food. So Father Michael, if you would please come to the podium.
Blessed are you, O Christ our God. You made the fishermen all wise by sending down upon them the Holy Spirit, and through them you drew the world into your net. Glory to you. Glory to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, bound forever into the ages of ages. Amen. Christ our God, bless the food and drink of these your servants. Bless your servant, James. Give him healing of soul and body. Bless his family and all here present. For you are holy now and always. Amen.
It came to me that I wanted to claim a poem in his honor. It's not by me, it's by W.B. Yeats. It's a well-known poem called Byzantium, which has a great deal to do with the tradition that Dr. Cutsinger has concentrated upon and the spirituality that he's been purveying for these years. So it's by Yeats. Byzantium. The unpurged images of day recede. The emperor's drunken soldiery are abed. Night resonance recedes. Night walker's song after great cathedral throng. A starlit or a moonlit dome disdains all that man is, all mere complexities, the fury and the mire of human veins. Before me floats an image, man or shade, shade more than man, more image than a shade. For Hades, bobbin bound in mummy cloth, may unwind the winding path. Mouths that have no moisture and no breath, breathless mouths may summon. I hail the superhuman, I call it death in life and life in death. Miracle, bird or golden handiwork, more miracle than bird or handiwork. Set upon the starlit golden bough can, like a cots of Hades, crow, or by the moon embittered, scorn aloud in glory of changeless metal, common bird or petal, and all complexities of mire or blood. At night, on the emperor's pavement flit flames that no faggot feeds, nor steel has lit, nor storm disturbs. Flames begotten of flame, where blood-begotten spirits come, and all complexities of fury leave, dying into a dance, an agony of trance, an agony of flame that cannot singe a sleeve. Astride on the dolphin's mire and blood, spirit after spirit, the smithies break the flood, the golden smithies of the emperor. Marbles of the dancing floor break bitter furies of complexity, those images that yet fresh images beget, that dolphin torn, that gong tormented sea.
Okay, I just got a couple. Now that everybody's stopped chatting, I can just say a couple of little things.
I was fortunate to play squash with Jim. And oh, he was a scrapper. And I wonder often if I'd played squash with the Christ himself, would he have been a scrapper? And I believe he would. And I believe that the one thing, the gift that we give each other, that he has given me periodically, is the face of Christ, even as a scrapper. Thank you for that. One other little thing. I called him up once and I said, somebody cornered me about having been channeled by the Archangel Michael. And I was in this channeling. I was involved. He was sharing this with me. And I was in this channeling. And they said, you know, you need to talk to Jonathan about this. And so he did. He talked to me about it. And so I called up Jim and I said, what do you think about this channeling? It sounds a lot like prayer, sort of opening yourself up to that which is greater than yourself. And I said, what protects you if you're in that opening state? And he said one word: orthodoxy.
My name is Bradley Stewart. I'm the worst student that James Cutsinger ever had. But I would like to regale you with, as you read, please continue what you're doing. I'd like to read some of the Rate My Professor reviews of James Cutsinger, starting from the bottom. One reviewer rated him average, saying, "This class is ridiculously hard for an intro class. I took this class first semester freshman year and felt like a grad student. I have been a proficient student of religion and maintain a high interest and ended up with a C in this particular class. Do not take this class unless you have lots of time to dedicate to it!" Exclamation mark. One rated it awful, saying, "Class should actually be called Faith, Doubt, and I'll Prove There's a God. Skeptics beware, but rain on your GPA." And the last one I can find, out of 47 reviews, only 3 bad. I'm sorry. The last one says, "The material was really interesting, and I didn't," no apostrophe, "I didn't mind going to the classes, but he ruins it by grading so harshly on the exams, and there are only 2 a semester. I wouldn't take this, is you are looking for an easy A." Lots of
reading.